The Golden Journey, a young Chinese boy's life in China and his immigration to a new world, the United States. My name is Qin Shenyu. I was born in China on November 20th, 1915, in a small village in the Toisun district.
Qin Shenyu was born in the northwest part of the Taishan district in a village called Old White Hill, or Lobaksan. Taishan is located near the southern coast of China, just south of the city of Guangzhou. There were approximately 100 small villages in the Taishan district.
I lived there with my older brother George, my older sister Lou, and my mother. We lived on a small plot of land where we grew rice and vegetables. We depended on Father, who worked in a laundry in the United States, to send us money to live on.
Early Chinese immigrants came from areas near the southern coastal shipping centers, where commercial trade was most prominent. Travel to foreign lands via merchant ships made immigration possible. The Chinese provinces where the earliest immigrants originated were from the Fujian and Guangdong province. During the late 1800s, the largest trading port in all of China was the city of Guangzhou, or Canton, located in the Guangdong province. Most Chinese immigrants to the United States came from the Guangdong province, coinciding with the growth of trade development with China centered in that area. Immigration on a large scale is documented as early as 1845, but reached larger scale numbers in the 1860s. Historically, mass immigration from a country is often prompted by a difficult living environment. Exodus is the attempt of the pursuit of a better life, and in some cases represents survival for the individual or for the family. Chinese immigration in the 1800s was fueled by a difficult living environment and news of wealth boom and gold rush in distant countries. The nickname, the Golden Mountain, was given to the United States and was a reflection of a hopeful Chinese immigrant's dream of a better life. The early immigrant pioneers were Cantonese traders from the three districts of Nam Hoi, Punyu, and Shantak, known as Samyap, but the vast majority of immigrants heralded from the poorer villages of the four districts of the Pearl River Delta in Guangdong Province, known as Sayap, namely Taishan, Sanhui, Huiping, and Yanping. In the 1840s, Chinese people were recruited by immigration brokers looking for groups of people willing to work on loosely defined work contracts. Chinese work contract recruitment, early versions indistinguishable between indentured laborer or slave, began in earnest in 1845. These work contracts were established on the ruins of the African slave trade. The word coolie was often used to describe the Chinese laborers and later became a derogatory term referring to the Chinese people. The word coolie was originally the name of an aboriginal Gujarat tribe of India and extended to mean transient laborer, coolie, which translates to hard strength in Chinese. Qian's father, Yi Zhengheng, was born in the year 1847 in Taishan. He was recruited to the United States to work on the building of the Union Pacific Central Pacific Railroad. This railroad linked the eastern part of the United States with the west. The railroad covered 1,700 miles from Omaha to Sacramento through treacherous lands. He was one of 10,000 Chinese laborers building for the Central Pacific Railroad west to east from Sacramento, California, to meet Irish immigrant laborers building east to west from Omaha, Nebraska. Promontory Point in Utah was the point at which the railroad tracks met. Qian's father, Yi Hongpan, was born in 1880 in Taishan and emigrated to Mexico in 1909. Crossing the border into the U.S. from Mexico, he traveled east and established a laundry service in a small steel town, Duquesne, near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Other families in the village also had their fathers living in the United States. The United States was called the Golden Mountain. Our village had no electricity or running water. We had to carry water from a well to our house. The village was very peaceful and the weather was always warm. I played with my brother George. We made kites out of rice paper and bamboo. The kites were made into different shapes like butterflies and centipedes. Sometimes we would attach noisemakers to the kites so the wind would cause a loud humming sound. It was a lot of fun.
Jiu, kite.
George and I also made bird cages out of bamboo. One time we caught a talking bird and taught it how to speak Chinese. The bird made us laugh. Nihoma.
Nihoma, how are you?
I hunted for frogs at night in the rice paddies for food. I would use a flashlight to surprise them so I could pick them up. I also caught fish in the rice paddies during the day.
Wah, frog.
My mother would carefully cook the fish I caught in a special shrimp and ginger sauce. She was a very good cook. It was delicious.
Mui, fish.
Use a very fresh, light white fish. The fish caught by Qian was a type of catfish caught in the rice fields. Open the fish and clean out the insides. Put a lot of fresh ginger on top of the fish. Put shrimp sauce paste, hamha, purchasable in a Chinese grocery store, on top of the fish. Steam it for 15 minutes. Serve with rice.
We went to a small one-room school where my teacher taught us Chinese classics, including Confucius readings. If I forgot a passage, my teacher would hit me over the head with a rod. Sometimes bumps appeared on my head from the ride and made me think that I didn't always like school. Later, the schools became more modernized with money sent from our fathers overseas. We studied math, science, history, and geography. I also learned to play volleyball. We even had a drum and bugle corps in the school. I played the bugle and had a white uniform, which made me feel proud. One day, my mother announced to me that my father was coming home from the U.S. after being away for more than 10 years. She also told me that he intended to bring me with him to the Golden Mountain. I was very excited, but also afraid. Father's return was a happy occasion, and our family enjoyed the reunion tremendously. He had never seen me before. I am sure he was surprised to find a small, skinny boy who played volleyball, played the bugle, and flew kites. Father stayed at home in China for about a year. He enjoyed not having to work day after day in the laundry. I would try to pull my father on a rickshaw for a little distance around the village. My mother would scold me because I was too small.
Quinn on his father. He was short, fat, and stout. He was serious and even-tempered. In the U.S., he was always trying to avoid trouble, particularly during the discrimination against the Chinese back then. People were jealous during the Depression that we managed to keep ourselves fed, although just barely. Father was a kung fu master and was afraid of hurting people if he would get into a skirmish, but he could defend himself if he needed to. He was a student of one of the most famous kung fu masters in Taishan. There really wasn't much time for him to do anything else besides work in the laundry every day from dusk till dawn. Father died of carbuncle in 1934 at the age of 54. He suffered a great deal of pain and never complained. He refused to go to the hospital because he was afraid of not having enough money to pay the hospital. When he died, it was one of the saddest days of my life. The laundry was located on Grant Street in Duquesne near Apricot Alley. Quinn came to the U.S. with his father in 1929. Quinn's father and uncle, his father's older brother, lived in Duquesne, PA, in a tiny room which served as laundry, bedroom, kitchen, and storefront. They lived very frugally and saved most of their earnings from the laundry to send to China to support those family members that remained there. Quinn continued to work in the laundry to support himself and his uncle until completing high school, then worked full-time in the steel mills to support himself through completion of college at Carnegie Tech.
My father announced it was time to return to the Golden Mountain and for me to return with him. We were both sad because we knew we might not be able to be together as a family again. The night before we left, Mother and I cried all night and we embraced again and again.
For immigrants, sacrificing their personal lives in order to support families who remained in China was a way of survival. For those Chinese immigrants living in the U.S., it was often a very lonely existence. The extended alienation from their families, fueled by the Chinese Exclusion Acts keeping Chinese out of the U.S., and American society's unabashed prejudice against Asians, made living in the United States painful. Quinn's father, Yi Hongpan, was never able to return to China following his departure in 1929 due to his unexpected death in 1934. Quinn was also not able to return to see his family in China due to the Depression and the escalation of the Sino-Japanese War. He was to be reunited with his brother and his sisters 40 years later in the United States. Immigration laws discriminated against Asians, and in particular the Chinese, throughout the course of U.S. history. On a comparative basis to any other race or nationality, enacted laws and bigotry targeted at the Chinese made Chinese immigration to the U.S. almost impossible. The following timeline provides a perspective of events and immigration laws for Asians and Asians of Chinese descent in the U.S. 1868. The Burlingame Treaty was signed between China and the U.S. that allowed immigration of Chinese ancestry into the U.S. and that naturalized Americans have the same rights as native-born Americans. But 2 years later, in 1870, the Nationality Act specified that only free whites and African aliens were allowed to apply for naturalized citizenship. Chinese were not white and could not immigrate legally. 1878, additional penalties were levied against Chinese living in America. In California, only fishermen of Chinese descent paid fishing and shellfishing taxes and a police tax to cover extra policing their presence required. Chinese could not apply for business licenses, employers could be fined and jailed for hiring them, and none could testify in court for or against a white man. In 1881, the Burlingame Treaty was suspended for a period of 20 years, but allowed Chinese already residents to stay and leave and re-enter the U.S. with a certificate of return. In 1882, encouraged by lobbying from California and increased anti-Chinese bigotry, the U.S. Congress passed the first Chinese Exclusion Act. It banned the entrance of Chinese laborers for more than 10 years, although some merchants and scholars were granted temporary visas. By 1888, certificates of return were considered void, so the returning Chinese travelers were denied re-entry into the U.S. In 1893, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Congress had the right to expel members of a race who continued to be aliens, having taken no steps to becoming citizens and incapable of becoming such under the naturalization laws. Ironically, because of the laws established by the U.S., this could only apply to the Chinese. No other race or nationality was legally excluded from applying for citizenship. In 1898, there was a breakthrough victory in the Supreme Court that states that a person born in the United States to Chinese parents is an American. In 1904, the Chinese Exclusion Acts extended indefinitely and made to cover Hawaii and the Philippines. In 1924, another Immigration Act was passed by Congress, specifically excluding Chinese women, wives, and prostitutes from citizenship. In addition, any American who married a Chinese woman lost his citizenship. Any Chinese man who married an American woman caused her to lose her citizenship. Some progress in 1938. A presidential proclamation lifted restrictions on immigration for Chinese and nationals of a few other Asian countries. The quota of Asian legally entering the U.S. was 100 per year. However, the Chinese were still explicitly ineligible for citizenship. In 1943, the U.S. and China signed a treaty of alliance against the Japanese, and Congress finally repeals the Exclusion Act, but continues to limit the quota to 105. Quinn's wife, Helen Chow, was able to enter the U.S. in 1945 under the repeal of this act. In 1946, Congress passed the War Bride Act, enabling soldiers to bring Japanese and European wives home, then enacted a separate law allowing the wives and children of Chinese Americans to apply for entry as non-quota immigrants. Ethnic Chinese already living in the United States could apply for citizenship. In 1952, for the first time, Chinese women were allowed to immigrate under the same conditions as men. In 1962, President Kennedy gave Congress a special message on immigration, saying it is time to correct the mistakes of the past. In 1965, a new Immigration and Nationality Act changed the old quota system so that the national origin no longer means race, but country of birth. In 1978, quota systems are replaced by a worldwide numerical limitation on immigration of 290,000 annually. On the basis of the immediate relative clause, about 22,000 Chinese began to enter the United States legally each year.
We said goodbye to our beloved friends and family, and embarked on a sampan boat bound for Hong Kong, then a steamer to San Francisco, California, and finally a train to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The train tracks to the western United States were also built by Chinese immigrants like my great-grandfather, but that is another story. I looked forward to see what the Golden Mountain would bring.
Quinn Chen Yu passed away November 5th, 2003 in Fountain Valley, California, with his beloved wife Helen by his side and his family.